again, welcome to anyone who's joining us. I know that you're coming in from the waiting room. Please enjoy these photos as we wait about 1 minute. It looks like 1 minute until the start of our webinar. Please feel free to let us know where you're joining us from. We always love to hear that. Just drop a comment right in the box. All right, it looks like we're right at about 4 o'clock. Some people are still joining, but I'm gonna hand this over to our host for today's webinar, Monica Buckle.
Well, thank you, Shannon, and good afternoon and happy June. Thank you for joining the Mesa Verde Foundation. I'm Monica Buckle. I serve on the Foundation's Board of Directors, and I'll be moderating today's event. We are most privileged to have Dr. Tara Travis presenting. Dr. Travis is a Supervisory Museum Curator at Mesa Verde National Park and Yucca House National Monument. Dr. Travis will discuss a selection of Native American and Southwestern jewelry donated by Mary Coulter. Mary Coulter donated over 800 pieces of jewelry and pottery to the park. We will explore the significance of this donation and the conservation work currently being done to these priceless silver objects. Mary Coulter was a prominent figure in the Southwest. Coulter was an architect, interior designer, and worked for the Fred Harvey Company, the notable hotel and restaurant chain along the Santa Fe Railway. Coulter had a deep appreciation for Mesa Verde, and in 1945, she bequeathed her remarkable jewelry and pottery to the park. The Mesa Verde Foundation is the official philanthropic nonprofit partner to Mesa Verde National Park. As a foundation, we secure funding for the park's capital improvements, special projects, and further promote understanding and preservation for ancestral Puebloan culture. On the topic of special projects at the park, the foundation recently received a grant from the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. This grant will cover all materials to build 2 ADA wheelchair accessible ramps to Chapin Mesa Archaeological Museum, which happens to be one of the oldest museums in the National Park Service, having been built in the early 1920s. We are entirely grateful to the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation for their gift. An upcoming fundraising initiative is our fall tour this October. The foundation is hosting a 4-day, 3-night behind-the-scenes tour at the park. Dr. Travis will conduct a VIP insider's look into the park's collections, specifically the new acquisition of items from the gift of the estate of David Rockefeller. Excitingly, some of these items will be unwrapped before your eyes, and most certainly guests will review Mary Coulter jewelry and pottery. The fall tour is led by Dr. Andrew Gilliford and Christopher Lewis, the renowned Zuni basket maker. Tour information and registration is in the chat box. I would like to thank the park superintendent, Cliff Spencer, for his support and our amazing board of directors. Our public programming is possible solely from donations and the support of Mesa Verde Foundation fellows and members like you. We thank you for creating space for this webinar offering. Now, circling back to our guest speaker, Dr. Travis is a public historian whose work has focused on the Four Corners region, working with tribal communities, managing museum collections, designing and installing exhibits, promoting historic preservation.
Oh no, it looks like we've had a glitch.
Well, I don't know if there's a technical glitch, but I'll continue. Yes. In her current position at Mesa Verde, she has directed the move of the museum collection and the installation of exhibits at the new Visitor and Research Center and shepherded the gift of the estate of David Rockefeller from the collection of David and Peggy Rockefeller. Prior to this position, she served for 10 years as an ethno-historian in the National Park Service Office of Indian Affairs and American Culture. Dr. Travis started her career at the Museum of Northern Arizona in Flagstaff, and then joined the Indian Arts Research Center School of Advanced Research in Santa Fe. Additionally, she and her husband spent 14 years working at Canyon de Chelly National Monument on the Navajo Nation. Dr. Travis holds a PhD in history from Arizona State University, a Master of Science degree in Architectural Studies and Historic Preservation from the University of Texas at Austin, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Art History from Northern Arizona University. We will be happy to take questions at the end of the presentation. If you could kindly hold them, that would be most appreciated. I would like to now welcome Dr. Travis.
Hey, welcome everybody, and thank you for that gracious introduction, Monica. I'm just thrilled to be here today and to talk about something that it's hard for me to curb my enthusiasm, but I will try. And I want to start out kind of dedicating this talk to Kathy Lamore, who has supported the collection and is just been an enthusiastic person in how much she has shared her enthusiasm, I should say, for the jewelry, for Mary Coulter's donation to the museum collection. And when I first came aboard in this position, it was around the time of groundbreaking for the new Visitor and Research Center. And she took me aside to talk to me about how much the jewelry meant to her and how important that donation is, and the need to make sure that we're caring for it and preserving it for future generations. So I'm happy to share our enthusiasm with you. So thank you, Kathy. I'd also like to say that this is a collaborative talk today. It's been a collaborative project. I can't wait to share it with you. And it's in 3 parts so that you can understand a bit of the flow of today's presentation. I'm going to start with Mary Coulter and Nussbaum and Mesa Verde. What's the connection and what's meaningful about Mesa Verde that might have prompted Mary Coulter to make the decision to donate cultural items, including jewelry and pottery, to Mesa Verde National Park. And then I'm going to talk about the project, about conserving silver. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that I have learned in speaking with and working with National Park Service and student conservators? And then the final part is sharing some of the conserved cultural items with you, the jewelry and some other silver objects, so that we have a chance to discuss the decision to polish or not to polish, put very simply, but it's been an interesting journey, and I hope you will stick with me as we go through these various pieces of this discussion today. I'm going to share my screen now, and there we go. All right, to polish or not to polish, Mary Coulter's silver jewelry. So here's a photo of Mary Coulter at Spruce Tree House. She is an internationally recognized early 20th century American architect. She was working in a field that was dominated by men, and she had a unique vision. She is most known, though, for her designs and the construction of 3 notable buildings at the Grand Canyon National Park. And so we don't always think of Mary Coulter first at Mesa Verde. However, as you're going to see, this was a very important place to her. She's known for incorporating Hopi, Navajo, Zuni, and Spanish design elements and reflecting the rustic character of the arts and crafts movement. But along the way, she really created interior and exterior buildings that are a unique expression of her view of the Southwest, her love of the Southwest, and her appreciation for Native American culture. So in 1932, she was really at the height of her career, and she was given a sabbatical, really, by the Fred Harvey Company. Excuse me?
Oh, I sent you a link this morning. Did you not get it in your email?
Hold on just a sec. All right, so there we go. We have someone muted. So anyway, in 1932, she was really at the height of her career. She had already designed and constructed the Hopi House and Hermit's Rest at the Grand Canyon, and she was working on her masterpiece, the Desert View Watchtower. So she was in the design phase, and she went on a trip throughout the Southwest, and she went to Mesa Verde National Park and Aztec Ruins National Monument and Bandelier National Park. And she took photographs, and she created a trip notebook, an inspirational set of notebooks, really, on these visits and the inspiration she received. And this is from her notebook, and this is her ode to her experience at Mesa Verde. It's called The Green Tableland. While from a proud tower in the town, death looks gigantically down. And I think I'll skip, although it's beautiful, and I've read it before to some of you in the Mesa Verde Foundation, I'll skip to the end here. It says, the Indian Watchtower owes a debt to Mesa Verde. Window and door openings, and the original kiva ceiling and square tower ruin were studied closely for use in the building. Several painted wall decorations were copied in the tower, and the proportions and lines of the tower itself were suggested by the gracious round tower of Cliff Palace. The masonry of the round tower was not followed on account of the greater height of the watchtower. It was required a more rugged style to maintain a correct scale. Also, being exposed to wind and weather, the watchtower would naturally have been built of sterner stuff than what was sheltered cliff, than was the sheltered Cliff Palace structure there. So she really was influenced very much by the architecture that she saw at Mesa Verde. And I'm going to share with you now some of her photographs of different cliff dwellings and ancestral Pueblo sites here at Mesa Verde. That's her in the hat and coat, looking down at Farview House. Here's Cliff Palace. And here she's really looking at the detailing of the masonry. So Mary Coulter had a friend in Jesse L. Nussbaum, and they met in San Diego at the Panama, oops, I didn't mean to do that. And they met at the Panama exhibit in San Diego. And this is him in Santa Fe, by the way. But he's dressed very differently. This is what I like to say is Nussbaum when he was in Santa Fe, and this is Nussbaum when he was at Mesa Verde. Anyway, he got involved in this exposition, and he and Mary Coulter really designed this desert exhibit. It was called the Painted Desert Exhibit, and they worked with Julio and Maria Martinez. Mary Coulter was working in the Fred Harvey office. She was drawing and creating designs. And then it was really Jesse and Julian who were fabricating her designs for the Painted Desert exhibit on site. So there was probably a lot of communication back and forth, and you begin to see, I think, the building of a relationship that may have, his knowledge of Mesa Verde may have interested Mary Coulter and grew her own appreciation for Mesa Verde National Park. So Jesse Nussbaum, of course, has a long relationship with Mesa Verde National Park, and he was superintendent 3 times. This is him kind of hamming it up. He was a photographer, and I think this is a little bit of a staged photo with A.V. Kidder, who is always known as pretty much of a snappy dresser, according to Marjorie Lambert, a fellow contemporary archaeologist. So I don't know, but anyway, it's a fun picture of Jesse in his early days as a photographer. So we wonder about that relationship, and we wonder about the influence of Mary Coulter when Jesse Nussbaum designed Chapin Mesa Archaeological Museum, which opened its doors in 2006. And these are some early photos of the museum. This is the photo on the left is taken from Jesse Nussbaum's notebook, where he's looking at design features in Spanish colonial buildings in New Mexico. And then you can see its application in the museum. We call this a modified Pueblo revival style. And Jesse Nussbaum also designed furniture that you can see here. This is one of his designs for a bench that looks similar to ones we have in the museum today. So in 1953, this is very much towards the end of Mary Coulter's career, she had an exhibition at the Laboratory of Anthropology of her jewelry. And it's interesting because it generated a lot of discussion, and I think a lot of hope that she would donate her jewelry to the Laboratory of Anthropology or other museums in the Southwest. But she decided to donate to Mesa Verde National Park, maybe because of that association with Jesse Nussbaum. And later on, she had a friendship with park naturalist Don Watson. So she decides to donate, as I said, and she had retired to Santa Fe in 1948, and she fell and broke her hip around 1955. And I think she was beginning to think about where did she want some of her things to go and where did she want to donate them. So she decided she would donate to Mesa Verde National Park, and Alvina Zimmerman helped her to catalog and prepare the jewelry for donation. As Mary Coulter had many friends in the National Park Service that she had met during her time at the Grand Canyon and other places. So she had a strong association, I would say, with the National Park Service. So she loans the jewelry, and then it is eventually donated to the park. And now the question is, what did the park do with that donation? And here is some drawings that I found in the park archive for the jewelry exhibit. And you can see that they're working out where they want the exhibit cases to go. So we definitely, we being Mesa Verde National Park, wanted to exhibit these cultural items right away. We didn't hold on to them. We didn't perform any preservation work at that time. At least I haven't found any notes to that effect or anything that would suggest that that happened. So once the donation came in, it went on exhibit very quickly. She wasn't able to visit the park, but she was in communication with the folks that were putting the exhibit together, and we have some correspondence going back and forth, making sure that she knew how the jewelry was being exhibited. As part of the donation, she requested that it not be called the mariculture collection, that it not be, yes, we were not supposed to use that term, mariculture's collection. And I think that's why we tend to say jewelry donated by mariculture, or to use some other phrase, because she made that specific request. Now, these are the only images I have found of the first exhibit, which was in Chapin Mesa Museum. And so we're going to see black and white images, and the cultural items are organized by tribal groups. So we have an assortment of jewelry from Zuni, Santo Domingo, Hishi necklaces, and a substantial exhibit of Navajo jewelry. And some examples of what they're calling the Navajo bridle, but they're horse stalls is another name for them. Isleta and Laguna. And here we have an exhibit of shell sources that helps to explain the materials that were used in various inlays. So that was the original exhibit. Then, as visitation continued to increase, the Park Service engaged in a new project called Mission 66, which was to improve visitor services based on visitor need, with the goal of having more accessibility, less congestion in parks, and that's why it was called Mission 66. They're looking at 1966 as the date that the Park Service will have improved its accommodations and access and reduced congestion for visitors. So what happened at Mesa Verde is a new visitor center was constructed. It was called Farview Visitor Center. And what was installed in the Farview Visitor Center? It was once again jewelry donated by mariculture. And you can see that the exhibits are updated. The lighting is a bit better. Maybe there were some improvements in the environment, although felt was often the fabric of choice in these exhibits. This is showing some of her pottery, which she also donated to the park. These are historic Pueblo pieces. And they used to allow visitors to touch the vessels, a corrugated vessel, a highly polished San Ildefonso piece, and a prehistoric kiva jar. So this is how the jewelry was exhibited now in the new exhibits. And she did provide funding for exhibit cases. And you're going to see some of these pieces as we move forward. So please note the butterfly, or the Zuni wingman right there in the center of the pins. The captions that you see on this slide are from the exhibit. So the jewelry was continuously exhibited from the time of the donation and continues today. One of the problems that developed was when we went to deinstall this exhibit after the construction of the new Visitor and Research Center. So fast forward from 1969, in 2010, I think I mentioned, we had groundbreaking for the new Visitor and Research Center. And so the Visitor Center was going to be relocated from Farview down to the park entrance, which was an amazing improvement for our visitors because they They now can plan their trip before they make the long drive into the park, the 19 miles on that windy road. And so they have the opportunity to plan their trip and to also explore the museum collection, because we have 2 repositories that are down at the Visitor and Research Center, and there are windows that look into the collection. So we were going to transition now and remove the objects that were on exhibit at Farview down to the Visitor and Research Center. And during de-installation, we found some problems. In fact, it's the only time during the move when I stopped. We had started to deinstall, removing the glass from the exhibit cases. I was working with my staff and trained volunteers, and we started finding things that were just really concerning, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't accidentally damage any of the jewelry during the deinstallation. So we called in a team of conservators from the National Park Service. They were familiar with our museum and with our collection. They had been advisors on the move and had trained myself and volunteers and other staff in the most up-to-date packing methods for the museum collection. And so they came and they assisted us in the deinstallation effort, and we learned some things about, wow, these objects have been on exhibit a long time and they've never had any sort of preservation treatments, and they need some love. So we did indeed move down to the Visitor and Research Center, but we know that her donation and is well known, and that it's well loved, and visitors enjoy seeing the items that she donated to the park. And so we continued to exhibit some of her donation down at the Visitor and Research Center. We didn't want to completely remove this amazing assemblage from the visitors. So we're going to show you now some examples of the jewelry that's on exhibit down at the Visitor and Research Center. And we designed this exhibit case so that we could swap items out, so that it would be continually evolving, and we would have a portion of her donation on exhibit at all times. But it also gave us the opportunity to take things off exhibit and evaluate them for their conservation needs. And that's exactly what we did. So here are the repository. Here we are looking at an exhibit of American Indian jewelry and pottery, and then the windows that look into the repository down at the Visitor and Research Center. And you can also see a little computer terminal. We have 30 objects that have been 3D scanned, so that people looking at the repository can also look at the computer terminal to get a glimpse, more of a glimpse of what we have stored down there. So for the items that were not on exhibit, we started doing an evaluation, and I spoke with and consulted with conservators when I wrote the project proposal, and we were looking at several aspects to this project. Study and evaluation, we're going to evaluate the condition of the items. We're going to do a technical condition assessment and document the condition. We're going to identify anything that appears to be any kind of damage. We're going to be interested in protecting. How do we protect these cultural items moving forward, protecting them from a less than ideal environment, protecting them from damage in handling. We're going to come up with conservation treatment proposals, preservation activities, and we also definitely want to have an interpretation and education component. and if possible, even potentially some public demonstrations so that the public can see conservators at work on the silver. Now, there are many items that are in the donation that are not silver. So the reason we wrote this particular project focusing on the silver was that the silver was most in need of immediate treatment, or potentially in need of immediate treatment. So now we're going to go to a video, 2 videos, in fact, where you're going to listen to 2 conservators who will discuss various aspects of this project. And then we'll come back and start part 2. Take it away. And maybe.
Shannon, if we could unmute the sound for the video, that would be great. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Cashman, one of the objects conservators working on the Mary Coulter collection from Mesa Verde National Park. This collection is primarily silver jewelry pieces that have tarnished. Tarnish is a dark surface appearance, like the one seen on this object here. This happens when the metal reacts with sulfur in the air, forming a dark sulfide layer. A coal-burning plant near Mesa Verde is a significant source of sulfur pollution for this collection. Relative humidity also affects the tarnish rate. Silver tarnishes faster as the relative humidity increases. Ideally, silver should be stored in an environment where the relative humidity is below 50%, with the object wrapped in a special material called silver cloth. This fabric is imbued with silver particles that preferentially react with the sulfur in the air before it can reach the objects. Gloves should also be worn when handling silver, as the oils and sweats from our hands easily transfer onto the surface of the metal and cause noticeable corrosion. We often see corrosion in the forms of fingerprints because of this.
While we wait for Shannon to pull up the second video featuring one of the other conservators, Tara, what has it been like, this journey of to polish or not to polish, and where are you currently with the conservation of the silver items?
So the project was written for 327 pieces of silver or cultural items, silver jewelry, and a couple of non-jewelry items. And we have completed the preventive preservation, conservation of the first group, which is 60 objects. So we'll talk about that.
Well, 60 is good.
Yes, it's good because it also.
Hello, my name is Audrey Harrison. I work as a conservation technician and I contract with the National Park Service, and I work for the University of Arizona. I currently reside in Tucson, Arizona, and I am originally from Northern Arizona and an enrolled member with the Navajo Nation. The workshop that took place up at Mesa Verde with the Mary Coulter Silver Project was quite an eye-opener. The workshop gave us an insight into the type of cleaning techniques and methods that would best be suitable for this type of collection. This gave us a starting point, and it also provided some more questions, basically. The pros for each type of cleaning technique, the cons for each type of cleaning technique. The workshop ended up giving us a lot of great information, as well as some difficult decision making, and that actually still continues today, about the level of sheen, about the amount of cleaning materials, about the even layer of polish, what does that look like, even to will there be any future residues that will show up later on in time. These are all the questions that we still ponder and talk about, basically for each piece. The workshop was very beneficial, and I would like to thank Tara Travis, Senior Curator at Mesa Verde, for the great opportunity, and the many conservators and folks that were involved in putting this together. I can foresee a number of workshops, consultations in the future with Navajo silversmiths, with members of the community, with conservators, with curators.
Well, thank you. So it does sort of trail off there, but we're all learning this new wonderful world of video, and I really appreciate both videos, and it shows you that this is a collaborative effort. As a curator, my role is really about understanding the context and discerning sometimes what the intent was with a given donation, and trying to be true to the wishes of the donor and the needs of the National Park Service, and the needs of the public. So I think that it's an interesting position, whereas conservators are definitely focused on the best preservation techniques to preserve objects in perpetuity, which is also one of the important, well, it's part of our enabling legislation. It's critical to the mission of the National Park Service that what is given to us in our care, that we preserve it in perpetuity. So I'm going to screen share again. And, oh, whoops. Oops, okay. So are you with me still? And can you see?
We're here, Tara.
Oh, good.
Take your time.
Oh, good. Okay, so this is part 2, and I want to move along, but this is a PowerPoint that was put together by one of the conservators during our project kickoff meeting in October of 2019. And this is where the conservators came together. They came to Mesa Verde to discuss how are we going to approach our silver treatment. And we also wanted to have some tribal silversmiths. We invited some a Navajo silversmith, and unfortunately he wasn't able to attend. So I contacted 3 different silversmiths that I know, and from 3 different tribal communities to discuss their opinions of to polish or not to polish. And we can talk about that in a little bit, but this is Betsy Burr, conservator Betsy Burr from the National Park Service. This was the PowerPoint that she gave at our kickoff meeting. And it provides you with quite a bit of detailed information on silver tarnish and the science behind silver tarnish, the corrosion that is referred to as tarnish or patina. It provides a protective layer that prevents further corrosion. Silver sulfide and other products such as silver chloride and corrosion products of other alloy metals are part of tarnish. As you heard Stephanie Cushman discuss, sulfur containing pollutants in the environment contribute to corrosion. Other sources would be wool, and you may remember that at the Farview Visitor Center, the silver jewelry, particularly in the Navajo cases, had a wool backing. Low quality drywall, plaster, grout products. So typical indoor air has an average level of sulfur pollutants ranging from 50 to 600 parts per trillion. So here is, and I'm going to move through this pretty quick, but the rate of tarnish often depends upon pollutant concentrations and relative humidity and temperature and tarnish thickness. It can be irregular, and we had examples of this definitely in the objects in the Mesa Verde. So here's a really good example of dark purple, black matte tarnish. So you can have a thin layer of tarnish, which is yellow or red brown, or it can be quite thick.
Tara, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we're not seeing a screen share. Are you sharing your screen?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Let me escape and let me do it again.
No
Oh my
problem.
goodness. I'm so sorry. Let me do it again. You know what though? That's okay because
You don't have to be sorry, Terry. You're doing beautifully. And the way you've described everything, it was a perfect mental image. I just kept seeing, you know, myself with like a shining cloth or silver polish. Oh, here we go. Now we can see perfectly. It's on full share.
Oh, good. I'll just go back. So once again, this is a PowerPoint put together by Betsy Burr, not by me, by a professional conservator looking at silver tarnish formation. And you can see the unevenness there. And this is thin yellow or red brown is thin tarnish. Thick tarnish is dark purple or matte black. I think this slide is really a very valuable slide. And of course, sometimes tarnish is desired. It helps, it adds depth to the design. And in silver, it's intentionally applied and it creates the wonderful three-dimensional quality that we so admire about silver jewelry. So we have many different avenues to prevent tarnish. What helps is low exposure to sulfur and other pollutants, obviously, low relative humidity, which we enjoy here in the Southwest when it's not the monsoon seasons, or low temperature. So sometimes we use silver cloth or pollutant scavengers, products embedded with silver or metallic salts like cloth, tarnish, paper tarnish strips, tissue paper, and of course, HVAC filtration helps. So as we were meeting, we were discussing, okay, how are we going to address the tarnish in the pieces in at Mesa Verde? So you want to ideally remove tarnish for a consistent surface appearance with minimal silver removal, right? We want to retain as much of the original silver as possible. And we certainly want to leave decorative tarnish intact. We can achieve a high polish, a low polish, or a reduction of tarnish thickness. And mechanical cleaning is the most common method. Here's a good example. So using fine abrasive particulates, scratches thinner than wavelength of light are not visible. And things that result in a difference in removal is the particle size and the hardness, cleaning duration, the pressure you apply when you're cleaning, what is carrying the particle, whether it's water, ethanol, or a dry cloth. So these were items that were mechanically cleaned with a silver polishing cloth. And by mechanical, we're just talking about it's still done by hand. It's just It's just the motion that your hand makes. So a polishing cloth and calcium carbonate can be a useful tool, because a regular patchy tarnishing can be difficult to even out, and we're going to see some of this. But of course, cleaning Navajo and Pueblo silverwork you have to really think about it. The artist's intent was it to be highly polished. Tarnish develops over time and can be a valuable indicator of age and authenticity. Some museums display historic silver polished with visible tarnish, depending on the collection, interpretation, and audience. And in the world of conservation, tarnish removal is irreversible, though it will reform with time. So this is an exhibit case at the Minneapolis Institute of Art, whereas if you were to go to, say, the Wheelwright Museum, you would see things with more what I would describe as a high polish. And you can look at coatings. So after, as we began to talk about the project, the conservators put together coupons, and these are little bits of silver with different types of treatment. You'll notice the one over on the left says none, and you can see how tarnished that piece of silver has become. These are little tiny bits of silver, and this one was placed in the VRC window inside the repository in a space that I have to say, it's a repository. It has very even temperature and humidity. So looking at that tarnish was a bit of a surprise. I learned some things. So what did we do? We decided, Audrey's right. We came up with a bunch more questions and a lot of back and forth conversation. But if we're going to start treating and performing preventive conservation on this silver, we have to all be speaking the same language. So we developed a silver polishing guide, and this is it. This is using silver jewelry from Mesa Verde, and we decided we would start with these 3 pieces and have a before and after photo for what is low polish, what is medium polish. And if you look at low polish, light corrosion reduction without producing a high shine, may have uneven corrosion compared to higher levels. So you're going to see some of that corrosion. It produces a low luster surface focused on highlighting design elements. Medium, you still may have some uneven corrosion, but it produces a more even surface focused on the overall luster and highlighting design elements without producing a high shine. And then high needs to be used and is appropriate for objects with uneven areas of dark, black, or brown, which you got a sense of that in the slide I pointed out earlier. But it's going to produce a high luster surface similar to the overall appearance when first manufactured. So this is what we were looking at. This is the before, some before photos. And I just did a composite. I took these composite photos because we do need to keep moving, but I think the bracelet and the ring really give you a sense of how there was a lot of corrosion on these silver pieces. And I think it almost distracts from you being able to enjoy the delicacy of Zuni inlay, for example. And as we discussed during the deinstallation, there were some practices that we would not do now, including this silver butterfly was glued to its mount. And the numbering system is sometimes hard to read when we're conducting an inventory. It can be hard to make out the numbers. Sometimes you have loose settings or uneven appearance. There were composite metals, copper and silver bracelets, for example. These are relatively stable. That surprised us a bit. So this is some examples where the need might not be as great as what you saw in the earlier images. So now, ta-da! As the project progressed and we made the determination of our polishing guide, then what happened next is 60 objects were packed and they were transported down to Tucson. So the conservators in the National Park Service and conservators who are partners from the University of Arizona could work on preventive conservation measures. And how we approached this work was every single cultural item, every single silver object, I received a treatment proposal. This is very common in the National Park Service. It describes, it has the catalog number, it has a description, it has the measurements, it has the date of the report, and it has a description of the conservation treatment proposal, and it discusses the condition and the treatment proposal, and then it has a line that says low, medium, or high polish, and I had to select which polish level I desired for that individual piece, and if there were any additional comments. So in one of these, I wrote retain design indices that have been intentionally darkened, and I would even upon occasion say I would like this object polished at a low level, and then I'd like to have a telephone call to discuss how we're going to progress if we want to go up a level to medium, or we want to go from medium to high. So some things warranted more than just a review of the treatment proposal. It warranted a conversation among all of us to determine what we wanted to do. And sometimes we'd start, of course, at the most conservative level in terms of tarnish removal, and then we would go from there. Some things I did want polished at a high polish level because of the condition, and you're going to see some of that. So here are the returned 60 objects. Yay! I'm looking right down there at the right-hand corner of the canteen, and I'm showing you some overviews of the conserved pieces, the polished pieces in the drawers. So here's the canteen. So looking back at my conservation treatment proposal, I'm just going to read to you from the treatment proposal. Let's see. The condition. The object is structurally stable. Fine linear abrasions, possibly from use, are evident overall. The interior metal of the canteen is white, likely a corrosion product formed when the object held liquor. Mottled light gray corrosion is present overall. The back catalog number is lacquered on the bottom edge. A partial catalog number is also present on the interior. So here's the treatment proposal. Clean the surface and interior with non-ionic detergent in deionized water to reduce loose dirt and residues from handling. Rinse the interior with acetone to remove any remaining residues. Remove catalog number and lacquer layers with acetone and add temporary tag. Reduce the corrosion layer on the surface to achieve an overall even appearance. Corrosion reduction will start by gentle polishing with a jewelry cleaning cloth. If necessary, this will be followed with a slurry of precipitated calcium carbonate in a mixture of water and ethanol applied with cotton swabs. The goal is to reduce the presence of any calcium carbonate by dry cleaning and cleaning using deionized water, ethanol, or acetone. Reapply catalog number by printing on archival paper and adhering using acrylic adhesive, and construct a custom storage and display mount. This one is one of the few that I selected high polish. Here's a Hopi inlay bracelet and then a Navajo bracelet on the left. You might recall this from the polishing guide. Both of these were in serious need of corrosion reduction. This is one that we started out low and moved to medium. I flipped the ring over so you could see the application of a new catalog number. Definitely an improvement. Here's a Zuni knife man or wingman. And this was, I marked this as medium. And the silver, of course, is what holds the inlay in place. This is a hat band. And I was just going to look this one up to see. I think I put, let me see, medium polish. You might recall the butterfly and the glue. We certainly were able to remove the glues. It's much more stable. These items were very challenging, I imagine. I don't know that, but just I was concerned about how they would turn out. And I think they just look so much better and you can see the detail so much better. These fine bracelets, you couldn't make out really the design at all. The one on the right was just brown and tarnished, and I don't recall that design on the left. It really wasn't visible. And in this one, I just think the silver and the turquoise now, the hand bracelet, it really, it just shows off the piece so much better in my view. I think that it just looks well cared for, and it just, the silver really sets off the turquoise in a beautiful way. Sorry, I'm gushing. All right, so anyway, those are the examples that I've provided for you today, and I'll now open it up. I think we're at an hour. Whew. I didn't think I'd get through it in an hour, so I'm thrilled. So I'm now available for some discussion.
Okay, well, thank you, Tara, especially the last few images of the results of the conservation. Really exquisite work. It was nice to see the butterfly after the polishing and once the glue, the residue was done with. So great efforts. We have a question from Seth Bradley, and he would like to know, do we know how old the silver is that was donated?
Oh, sure. The age of the pieces that were donated. So, yes, we have a good idea either from her notes or just we can date the piece according to the way that it was manufactured. Sometimes the artist markings will tell us. So most of these silver objects were purchased in the 1920s, and most are from that 1900 to 1940 time period. And so age, definitely, I know where you're kind of going with the question. The patina gives you a sense of the age of the piece and how it was worn. And so you're removing some of that sense of antiquity, the sense of the passage of time. But it also is actively eroding the piece and makes it, in some cases, we're not able to exhibit because the condition is too poor. It's not going to be able to withstand the changes in humidity and temperature that objects experience when they're on exhibit. But most of what you're looking at, I'd say 1920s is a good round number to assign to the various pieces.
Great, thank you. We have a question from one of our fellows and photographer extraordinaire, Todd Bacon, who's right behind me, this image. He would like to know, where was the Far View Visitor Center located? I suppose prior to the new visitor center being built.
Right, the Farview Visitor Center is still located in the park. It's about, what is it? I think it's about, is it 17 miles? It's about 4 miles from the current museum. So it's in the Farview area. The selection of the site was actually called Navajo Hill. And originally it was going to be Navajo Hill Visitor Center, but Farview is, oops, I've got, so hold on just a sec. Sorry, I didn't want my call disrupting the group. So anyway, where was I?
The Farview Visitor Center.
Oh yeah, the Farview Center is still there. You can, so it's not currently occupied, and the park has explored several different options, and they've had, they've explored doing opening it up as a tribal cultural center. Right now, the thinking is that we might partner with CU Boulder in the future. They have a museum and science program, and they might have interest in pursuing some exhibits in that space. So it's available for future use.
Oh, that would be an awesome resource. We have a wonderful question from Tish Varney. What happens to the turquoise in polishing? Is it scratched due to its relative softness?
That's a really good question too. I imagine that this is really a question for the conservators, but I imagine they have techniques to try to protect the turquoise while they're working on the silver. And I imagine that they cleaned the turquoise as well. You could certainly see that the turquoise was it's not polished, but it's been cleaned. And so you can see the details and the color, I think, better than before. Hi, Tish.
And then I have a personal question for you, Tara. Once the conservation for all the silver items is finalized, how do you and the museum intend to share this with the public?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, because our plan is to create an online exhibit. And right now I'm working with the park's new visual information specialist on the creation of a web-based exhibit. And I hope to include some before and after images and to discuss the project as well. Since we have over 300 pieces requiring preventive conservation, and this was just the first group that's come back, it also provides time for more public input, for more discussion. It allows us the opportunity to bring in some Navajo silversmiths, Zuni silversmiths, to look at the low, medium, and high polished pieces that have come back, and to, have a conversation with our tribal communities about the level of polish, and are we approaching the project in ways that they think will maintain the character of the pieces and allow for their continued preservation and curation into the future.
Wow, that's great. I love the idea of having this collaborative method of conservation with tribal outreach and really involving their expertise and knowledge. Let's see. Oh, we have a follow-up question from Seth Bradley. Is there a follow-up plan for future cleaning or maintenance and/or polishing?
Yes, it's a very good question. So we have a long ways to go before the entire assemblage is cleaned and polished, and there's going to then be what's called a preservation plan for us to follow, and how we treat the silver objects moving forward. One of the things we're doing right away is we've added silver cloth to the drawers where we're where we are housing the silver. And you might have noticed that there are sort of these high walled boxes that we created. Initially, our idea was to leave the pieces more open. You know, there would have been, I don't know, their appearance in the drawer might have been more like their appearance on exhibit, but the boxes are really important. They really help to prevent any kind of damage, any kind of rolling of the object. These are small items, and the high walled boxes are really helpful. And you can tilt, the way that they constructed the boxes was very innovative. They kind of, you can actually tilt up the fabric that the objects rest on, so you can see different angles of the jewelry without handling them. And a big part of this project is thinking about how we handle them when they're in the drawer, or when we're giving a behind the scenes tour, or we're moving them back and forth from exhibit, how to do that in a way where we just handle them less.
Well,
That makes me think of Stephanie's video when she mentioned that fingerprints often are what cause tarnish. So that's really important, I think.
Mm-hmm. It is. It really is. Something to think about with our own jewelry, right?
Right.
I'll just give a couple more minutes to see if we have any last minute questions coming into the chat box. But otherwise, Tara, on a more personal note, do you have a favorite item, or one of a favorite item within the collection? I'm sorry, within the donated items.
Right, the donated items. Well, I think the bracelet with the turquoise that shaped like human hands. She was fond of depictions of human hands, and there's several different pieces in the donation of human hands. And so I think that the way that bracelet turned out, the marriage between the silver and the turquoise and the way they played off each other, you really could see the hands in a way that you just didn't before. So I think that's one of my favorites, and certainly was something and she was interested in as well.
I think that's the beauty of conservation and restoration. It breathes back life into an object, and it really becomes a living entity again.
Well, thank you. You know, in making this determination, I think the one thing I went back to over and over again is, what was her purpose in making that donation? And it was for the cultural items to be exhibited. And so if you're going to exhibit objects, you have to conserve them and care for them and maintain them so that the visitor can enjoy them and they'll be around forever. So I think that guided my decision-making a lot. Great. All of our decision, and I should say our decision-making, because it was definitely a group effort.
Yeah, you can tell that. Let's see, we have a question from one of our fellows, Doug Bacon. It goes, you mentioned the glue was a surprise when you began to prepare for the move. What other surprises were there?
When we were deinstalling, I would say that the other surprise was a number of the shell necklaces the shell pieces are strung on cotton. That's usually what is used. And the necklaces had been hung on bits of hard wire. Well, that wire, you know, is just abrading against the cotton, and eventually the cotton's going to become so weak that it breaks. So we got really concerned when we saw that as well. And it probably, you know, these weren't intentional mistakes. It's just the way we do things in the past is not how we would do things now. And it was, at the time, the weight of the piece wasn't very heavy the way that they did it. But I think over time, you know, just being on exhibit that long, things begin to wear. So fortunately, the cotton was still intact, but we wanted to remove it as quickly as possible. So those are the two examples of things we found in far view. But what's interesting about Farview is, you know, they were using felt, and it's these were not environmentally, these weren't environmental museum cases. So the environment wasn't as stable or controlled as it could have been. But given that, we were also pleasantly surprised that there wasn't more corrosion. So they were pretty, they must have been sealed pretty airtight, that the silver was still in relatively stable condition.
Great, thank you. And we have a third question from Seth Bradley. Thank you, Seth, for your enthusiasm. Did the current deterioration you are cleaning now occur over the last 100 years, or had it been cleaned in the meantime?
It's a really interesting question. We were studying those black and white images from the initial exhibit with magnifying glasses and scanning them and trying to, you know, enlarge them and looking and trying to determine, was there a high level of polish when they went on exhibit? And, you know, it's hard because the flash was reflecting off of the objects. And we all kind of came to the conclusion that they didn't have a high shine, and there wasn't any polishing done before they went on exhibit. Some were more polished than others, and there was definitely polish residue, you know, old green silver polish that probably had been there for a very, very long time, even before the pieces had come into the collection. So the museum collection. So yeah, I think that that wasn't a part of any work that was done when they went on exhibit. And I also think that because of how quickly the exchange happened. They came into the park and they went on exhibit in a relatively short period of time.
Well, Tara, I must thank you so much because I follow the work you do. I have a curatorial background and cultural consulting as well. So the work you do is very meaningful on so many different levels. And so it's been such a treat for me, as much as it has been for the audience. So just thank you so much for a beautiful presentation and the work you are doing at the park.
Well, thank you. And thanks for hanging with me, all of you, as I forgot to share my screen, and I'm glad it all worked out. And I'm happy you had the opportunity to hear from some other voices on the project.
Thank you. And I just want to remind people that you will be receiving a recording of this webinar if you registered, which obviously you did if you've joined us. I have been told by several people that they had difficulty getting into today's webinar, and we'll be sending the recording to them as well. So if you have a friend who wasn't able to join us, just know that we'll be sending this recording in the next 48 hours. And thank you, Tara. I just want to say that I really admire all of the thought and the effort you went to figure out if this was the right thing to do. I think that shows a whole lot about who you are as our museum curator. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the work of the Mesa Verde Foundation.
We're getting lots of very positive messages saying thanks.
Yes. Hi, Tish.
Well,
I can't do it without my volunteers, and I appreciate everybody who's worked with me.
Wonderful. So Monica, if you're good, I think we're ready to end. Is that fine with you?
Yeah, have a wonderful evening, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.